Fashion is a powerful force in the modern world. You think you're just throwing on your favorite band shirt, but really you're now walking the streets in a magnet that attracts a few people you want to talk to and about 100 absolute weirdos who haven't had a consensual conversation in over a decade. Seriously though, buying and wearing merch can be a great way of supporting something you care about.
Merchandising. And the t-shirt is everything.
I treasured that shirt. I love that shirt.
But the problem with merch and the vast majority of modern clothing is that it's being made to be thrown away. And that's not an exaggeration. Most of today's clothes are being manufactured for dirt cheap using terrible labor standards and low quality materials and being shipped thousands of miles to stores around the world only to be worn an average of 7 times before being discarded and ending up in a landfill. And that's if they get worn at all, because we are landfilling unused merchandise at a staggering rate. And if you're wondering why all that unused merchandise doesn't just get donated to a thrift store, a lot of it does. But due to the sheer volume of clothing we produce, up to 90% of donated clothes get rejected, and chances are it'll end up right back at the dump with its friends. It is now so cheap to make merch that companies will order thousands of shirts, give away as many as they can for promotion, and then trash whatever they've got left. There's actually an industry term regarding branded merch. They call it brand fill, which is exactly what it sounds like. And I don't normally like puns, but for some reason that one really pops. But I don't want to shit on selling merch altogether. It's one of the most consistent ways for bands and entertainers and content creators to make any money. Now that streaming services have absolutely destroyed album sales, musicians are finding it a lot easier to make $15 selling one shirt than they are scraping together thousands of unique listens at less than half a penny per play. Now, I may not be a singer, songwriter, fun guy to talk to at parties. But since merch is a good way of getting the word out about your stuff, we wanted to make some Climate Town t-shirts. When we found out about the mountains of disposable merch and the emissions and labor violations associated with it, we decided we could feel okay about it by finding a supplier who sources their materials responsibly and pays their workers a living wage. The thing is, we simply could not find that person. It was crazy. We spent literal years looking around and not making merch. But then we found a way to make shirts that we feel pretty good about, we think could be a template for other people who want to make merch too. Are they perfect? Probably not. But we figured we'd make an episode about the process and the overall problems with merch as we try to figure it out ourselves. And maybe there's a way to make merch that doesn't feel terrible. Or maybe not. You be the judge. Hi, I'm Rollie Williams, the guy with a climate science and policy degree and the proud new owner of 846 Climate Town t-shirts. And this is a video about the heaping pile of garbage that is merch. Welcome to Climate Town. Now, there was a time where if you heard a song you liked, it probably sounded something like this. Then you'd just go home and have a nice long think about it. That was being a music fan. Hey, remember the time we heard that song? That was pretty great. But then they figured out a way to let you buy the record so you could hear the song at home.
What you're going to hear about today is nothing short of a miracle. A living stereo played on a record.
And that went well for a while, but now everyone was so goddamn addicted to music that they needed something more.
What'd you do wrong this time, Pop?
They needed all their friends and family to know exactly what kind of music they liked. They needed merch. And back then, it wasn't just t-shirts. Whoa, heard you love Elvis, friend. How about some Elvis gum, Elvis bracelets, Elvis shoes, maybe even some Elvis hound dog orange lipstick? Oh, you hate Elvis. Fantastic. Here's a pin that says, I hate Elvis. Or maybe you love the Beatles. Now, Beatles shirts are cool, but you could also have a wig. Here's a lunchbox. How about some bobbleheads?
I'd like to get 1,500.
I'd offer you like 200 bucks.
By the 1970s, AC/DC supposedly made more money selling merch than from selling tickets on their world tour, and notorious face paint enthusiast Gene Simmons is still talking about all the money he made from Kiss merchandise.
We outsell the Beatles and Elvis combined. No other music act of any kind has ever done as many tchotchkes as we have. I'm hungry.
The idea of merch has expanded even further in the past few decades and has grown to include cereal monstrosity Coronation Flakes in honor of the latest vampire who will get to be driven around the streets of London. But there is no more dominant item in the history of the multi-billion-dollar merch industry than the t-shirt.
Gas!
They are so popular that they've become hilarious punchlines in famous comedy t-shirts, I saw blank and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, and of course, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Bazinga. They've even expanded beyond bands to include TV shows, movies, government agencies, pharmaceutical companies, family 5Ks, bachelor parties, and more. An algal bloom of custom t-shirt companies exploded in the internet age, and now there are thousands of companies eager to take care of all your merch needs. In minutes, you can get multiple designs in a dozen colors and sizes, all manufactured, printed, and shipped wherever you want. Want to sell them online? No problem. They'll even set up a website where anyone who wants your custom shirt can get it shipped straight to their house. That's how easy it is. And you can do it all for $5 a shirt. Fucking wild. And all of this might have been fine if it weren't for the hilariously devastating problems with how we manufacture modern clothing. We actually did a whole video about fast fashion. I recently rewatched it, and honestly, it holds up pretty good. So give it a watch if you feel like it, link in the bio. But there are a few important points to hit in order to make this video work, and to make sure it's not boring, let's deliver them in the style of a classic BuzzFeed list.
Welcome. You've got mail.
Now this will come as a shock to exactly nobody, but there are a ton of fully documented human rights abuses in the fashion industry. The only thing more impressive than the sheer number of violations is the variety of abuses, which include, but are not limited to, unsafe working conditions, including over 1,000 deaths in a single factory collapse, forced labor,
modern day slavery, that's what rights groups say is going on,
brutally long hours, sexual harassment, child labor,
Chili, how old are you?
and so much more. To make 1,000 custom shirts for $4.95 a shirt, you're gonna have to cut costs. And that almost always means paying the people who make the shirts an absolutely unlivable wage. Just imagine paying someone to grow and harvest cotton, paying someone else to process it and spin it into thread, paying someone else to sew the shirt together, paying another person to dye the shirts, sew the tags on, and to print "Killin' It" and add a graphic from season 3 of The Walking Dead. Does that sound like the kind of thing you can pay someone a decent rate to make and still sell for $7.49? The estimates are all over the map, but no matter which study you pick, the global greenhouse gas emissions produced by the apparel and footwear industry are absolutely staggering. The UN clocks it at about 8% of all the greenhouse gas emissions humans produce. And these emissions come from multiple parts of the supply chain, like burning fossil fuels for industrial equipment and electricity demand to power machinery, but one of the big ones is transportation. In 1965, the United States made about 95% of our clothing domestically. By the 90s, it was down to 50%, and now we make 2% of our clothing here, which means 98% of our clothes are made in other countries. And that usually means multiple other countries, because clothes are routinely sewn together in one country, shipped to another country to be printed, shipped to another country to be labeled and tagged, shipped to another country to be packaged before being shipped to America. And these trips are almost always being made using fossil fuel powered cargo ships, trains, or planes, which, and I hope you guessed it, emit a whole lot of greenhouse gases. And I truly cannot overstate the volume here. We are drowning in products from places like Shein and Temu and whatever new ultra-fast fashion brands realize they can sell disposable clothes to fashion-crazed Americans. And I kinda mean drowning literally here, because there's an import loophole in the US called the de minimis exception that lets you ship a package to the US tariff-free if it's less than $800 in value. And in 2022, just Shein and Temu by themselves sent 210 million of these de minimis packages, which, interestingly enough, was the population of America when we used to make almost all of our clothes domestically. Really makes you think. Or maybe it doesn't, we just kind of needed an ending to this section and that number kind of fit nicely. So that's how the sausage is made, baby! Before the year 2000, cotton was the #1 ingredient in clothing. And it's still a massive global crop today that's frequently grown in dry areas, requiring farmers to use a huge amount of water for irrigation. But don't worry, because they're only growing about 70 billion pounds of cotton every single year. But since 2000, there's a new king in town. I'm talking about polyester. And it is fucking everywhere, including more than half of all the textiles we use today. And here's the thing about polyester, it's just plastic. Which means you, right now, are probably wearing plastic clothes. And where does 99% of all plastic come from? You guessed it, oil and gas. Congratulations, oil and gas. You're not just producing CO2 to ship the clothes, you are the clothes. And I sure would love to talk about microplastics right now. Oh boy, would I love to say something like between 200,000 and 500,000 tons of microplastics from textiles enter the global marine environment each year, or even something like microplastics from your clothes can leach chemicals into your skin, and we're basically doing a huge global experiment to see how plastic tolerant the human body is, but this is a BuzzFeed list. So I guess you want to see which greenhouse gas you are based on who your middle school crush was? Remember the first 3 bullet points? Overproduction makes all 3 of those a lot worse. Now the figures on how much we overproduce are actually really hard to nail down, partially because we produce so many clothes all across the world, and it's just really difficult to keep track of them. Each year we probably make somewhere between 80 and 150 billion articles of clothing, and between 10 and 40% is just wasted, never sold at all. And even if you take the low side of both of those ranges, without even considering the clothes people do buy that they probably don't really need, you end up with billions of pieces of unnecessary, brand new clothing heading right for the landfill or the incinerator. Or if they're really lucky, they'll get to live out the rest of their days in the beautiful Atacama Desert in Chile in a massive dystopian heap of trash clothes that apparently sometimes burns, releasing all those synthetic fabrics and chemicals back into the sky as toxic smoke. But I guess it's all worth it for an unlimited supply of shirts that say Bazinga.
Another one.
Ooh, baby, we're back again, because treating workers poorly and paying them as little as possible has become so normal and so expected that even the premium brands are doing the same shit. In 2022, investigative journalism group Follow the Money published a report about sustainability golden child Patagonia. And it turns out, Patagonia manufactures clothes in some of the same factories as fast fashion companies. The report claims that one day a factory might be manufacturing for Patagonia, but the next day it might be Target or Amazon or Nike or Zara. Now in 2015, Patagonia made a pledge to pay all their apparel assembly workers a living wage within 10 years. That deadline is next year. And what % of factories that Patagonia uses pay a living wage? Oh no! Well, who's reporting that? Because there's a lot of fake news out there these days. Oh no, it's their own website. And this isn't to say Patagonia and Shein are both equally bad. Patagonia is one of the most sustainable large-scale apparel brands in the world. They're donating money to a bunch of good causes, they're facilitating the repurchase and reuse of their clothes through the Wornwear program, and it was their own disclosure of their factories that led to the Follow the Money report. They appear to be doing a lot of the right things. That's how normalized this has become. And if we're really going down this rabbit hole, a lot of the clothing made in the US is from workers making less than minimum wage. There are sweatshops in America. the Department of Labor did a series of sting operations in Los Angeles and found labor violations in 85% of factories, including factories used by premium brands like Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus. So while you're almost guaranteed to be getting an environmentally damaging and/or human rights abusing shirt if you pay $10 for it, you can pay $100 for a shirt that's doing a lot of the same stuff. It's enough to make you want to never put on a shirt again. So what do you do? Sorry about that. I used to do that a lot. It's kind of funny. Anyway, so what do you do? Well, we asked ourselves the same question. Our first thought was to not make anything new at all. We ended up talking to a company that had 100 sun-damaged shirts to recycle, and we got them to send those shirts to us instead. We printed Climate Town on them and sold them at live shows. Not too bad. But while repurposing old shirts made sure we didn't add to the climate or labor problems, getting 100 sun-damaged shirts at random intervals isn't exactly a repeatable process for us or anyone else. And it doesn't do a lot to make sure we're supporting the few people who are going out of their way to change the fashion industry. So we didn't do shit for a few months. But then one day, we came across a company called Ethics Merch. They run the merch program for the Sunrise Movement and Third Act, and also a ton of unions across the country. And when we asked them if they knew anybody who could make a t-shirt without, underpaying their workers or beefing the planet too hard, they pointed us to a company in North Carolina called TS Designs, founded by a man named Eric Henry. His last name is a first name? That's a good start. See, originally TS Designs was a printer for a ton of major brands. Your Nikes, your Tommies, your Gaps, that sort of thing. They had 100 employees who all had good jobs and healthcare and retirement plans. But then after NAFTA and the globalization movement of the 1990s, they went from 100 employees to 20 in 2 years and were on the brink of bankruptcy.
One of the true economic miracles in the whole history of civilization.
But then Eric decided to shift his company to making sustainable apparel right here in the US. And about 15 years ago, they started making their Cotton of the Carolinas shirts. Instead of sending every shirt thousands of miles to be put together, they used the radical breakthrough technology of getting cotton from a local farmer, processing it locally, and then making it into shirts and printing on it right there in the same part of the Carolinas. It travels less than 800 miles to go from the farm to a full-on finished shirt. And if you're having trouble visualizing this, here's a nice map I made showing the cotton traveling around Indiana Jones style. And this map is not a guess, because every company that touches this shirt is trackable and verifiable. There's even a QR code in the tag of the shirt that you can scan to see all the companies along the chain who, by the way, are paying their employees a living wage. You wanna call the Cotton Ginner? Okay, they might not pick up, they might be busy, but that's their number. And also, Cotton of the Carolinas shirts are truly 100% cotton, which means they're not messing around with plastic at all, not even in the thread. Also, they dry farm their cotton, which means it doesn't require extra irrigation.
The way we determine if cotton's ready to pick is if that seed will pop. Did you hear that pop?
TS Designs has even developed their own printing process, which doesn't leave ink on top of the shirts, which makes them easier to recycle, or if they're in a landfill, decompose. Finally, scraps from production go to a company called Material Return, which is a worker-owned cooperative, by the way, pretty cool, who recycle them into recycled cotton thread. What I'm trying to say is that we just really like what companies like TS Designs are up to. And for the record, they did not pay us to say this. Quite the opposite. We paid them thousands of dollars to do a run of Climate Town shirts, but we also think it's important to shout them out as much as possible because it's good to promote things you want to see more of in the world. TS Designs, Cotton of the Carolinas, QR codes. And of course, any good band shirt needs art. Luckily, AI can do that for free, and it's actually getting pretty good at remembering that hands usually have 5 fingers. So you illustrators out there. No, I'm just kidding. We hired a fantastic artist named Margalit Cutler, whose work has been in the New Yorker, New York Magazine, and a bunch of other places not from New York. She made us a couple of slick designs, and here they are. Pretty cool, huh? Huh? Okay, that's too many faces. And just in case you forgot who made the art, bop 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 bop, bop 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 bop, bop bop bop. There's her signature right there. Pretty sneaky, huh? Anyway, Margalit's art gets printed on those Cotton of the Carolinas shirts, which then go to the good folks at Ethics, where they drop them in a recycled cardboard shipper from a company called Eco Enclose and send them right off to you, finally completing the Indiana Jones map.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
Wow, you couldn't make a movie like Indiana Jones anymore, what with cancel culture. Anyway, that's the story of how we made Climate Town shirts. We printed up 423 of each design, and we're gonna see how it goes. Proceeds go directly back to making videos like this, and also podcasts and newsletters, and whatever the hell this is.
Is anyone here a doctor?
We don't need a
For
doctor.
real. Anybody got a master's
I just
degree?
need a little bit of water, just a little bit of water.
A master's degree
Just
in
a
a
little bit of
hard
water.
in a hard science?
Just a little bit of water.
A hard science,
You
right
go-
there.
you go
Get
get the
up
water.
here.
Is this the perfect process? Again, probably not. But I think it's a good way to get the ball rolling in the other direction, and if you yourself are thinking about having some custom t-shirts made for your band, or your bachelorette party, or your pharmaceutical convention, I think these are some good things for you to keep in mind on your t-shirt journey. And they may cost a little bit more, but that's closer to what a t-shirt should actually cost. Anyway, here's the shirts that we made. Pretty cool, huh? Back to you, Rollie. Thanks, Rollie. Okay, let's wrap this thing up. There are a lot of climate-y problems that are so far outside of the hands of individuals that the only thing that can really help is big, policy-induced systemic change. And while there are a lot of parts of fast fashion that could benefit from policy change, in this case, consumer demand, aka us buying stuff, is also a major factor. But bonus, it's a factor that you, not you, too tall, but yes you, and even you can have some control over. You can start by wearing the clothes you already have. And if your wardrobe is totally busted like mine is, and you want to switch it up a little bit, you can do a clothing swap with your friends or community, or buy used clothes secondhand. Remember, a lot of these secondhand clothes have probably never even been worn. I mean, it's a pretty thin upside to our overproduction problem, but it's there. You can also be more discerning with your buying habits by trying to send a clear market signal by buying from companies that you feel are doing a good job. It is super hard to shop with any kind of certainty nowadays because companies know what they're doing is a problem and will often fill their websites with empty promises rather than actual change, but there are some links in the description to help you find some responsible manufacturers, and also a few minutes on popular search engine google.com can give you a better sense of who you're thinking of buying from. It ain't easy, okay? If it was easy, it wouldn't be a huge problem. And I wish it was as simple as never buy any clothes ever again. But even that falls victim to the divest versus invest problem. There's a big push to divest from things like fossil fuels, corporate farming, and fast fashion, and that is a really great push. Like, keep doing that for sure. But going the extra mile means reinvesting on the solution side of the problem, like investing in renewable energy, regenerative agriculture, or slow fashion. So by all means, adjust your personal buying habits, but just remember, nothing hits quite like policy. And lucky for us, there's a hot little bill coming through the New York State Legislature called the Fashion Act. And if it gets passed as is, any fashion brand clearing over $100 million in annual revenue would be subject to a litany of environmental and human rights standards. It's honestly a little that the only way to get companies to care about the environment or human rights is to force them to, but them's the breaks. Our friends over at Climate Changemakers have put together a whole playbook on ways you can get involved with your state legislature, and you can check it out, link in the description. And once more, with feeling this time, we made Climate Town shirts. I'm so happy about them. They came out really great. Buying them will not save the planet, but it was an incredibly eye-opening experience trying to go through the process of making shirts with any amount of sustainability in mind. And if you'd like to commemorate that process by buying yourself a t-shirt, I think that would be a very cool idea you just had. There's a link right below the YouTube video, should be right below the YouTube video. I'm not 100% sure that we will have figured that out by the time you're watching this, so if it's not there, check in the description. If it is there, you can use that link if you feel like it. Okay, big thanks to Eric Henry and TS Designs for making shirts that we actually feel good about bringing into this world. And also thanks again to Ethics Merch and folks like Daniel and Ruth who guided us through this process and are running the store for us. they're working on connecting ethical and sustainable apparel companies with people who want to buy ethical and sustainable shit, and they've done exactly that thing for us. And also, huge thank you to Marguerite Cutler for doing the art and forever immortalizing this mustache on a t-shirt. If I'm being completely honest, it kind of freaks me out. But the real question is, do we still have a Patreon page? Hell yes we do! And we actually added a whole bunch of new tiers and perks and cut footage and town halls and all kinds of bullshit that makes it actually kinda good. So check it out, link in the bio. Also, if we get to 5,000 paid patrons by June 1st, I will install a telephone right here on my desk that you can call if you're a patron. Wow, doesn't that sound like an incredible waste of time for both of us? Probably. You'll have to find out. Also, we have a podcast called The Climate Denier's Playbook that features me and daily show writer / my childhood friend, Nicole Conlan. Also, we have a newsletter written by me and Climate Town writer-director Matt Nelsen. Links to all that in the description, and that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate you. See you next time. Okay.
I'm hungry.
I have not tried marijuana. I have never used it at any time.
Did you hear that pop?
Goodbye.